When a federal judge blocked President Trump's border order, he didn't tweet. Instead, he walked straight into the Supreme Court and called out Chief Justice John Roberts face to face, with the entire country watching. The leather chair creaked softly as Donald Trump leaned back, eyes locked on the TV screen mounted above the fireplace in the Oval Office. The news ticker at the bottom hadn't changed in the past 30 minutes. Federal judge blocks deportation order, Trump administration, in contempt. He didn't blink. At the other end of the room, Caroline Driscoll, his press secretary, hovered near the doorway with her iPad clutched against her chest like a riot shield. She knew better than to interrupt when the president was quiet. "James Bosberg," Trump finally said, his voice flat. "He thinks he's running the country now." Caroline stepped forward. "Judge Bosberg's ruling cites the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. "I know what it is," Trump snapped, not raising his voice but slicing the air with it. He found the oldest, dustiest statute he could wrap in modern outrage and called it justice. On the coffee table in front of him lay a thick binder filled with annotated immigration policies, border maps, court transcripts, and pages marked up in red ink. Trump stood. "They're daring me to act out, daring me to cross a line so they can scream dictator on TV for the next 5 weeks." Pam Bondi entered from the West Wing hallway, dressed in dark navy, no jewelry, just a notepad, and a look that said she'd been through worse and won. "It's not just El Paso anymore," she said. "Bosberg's ruling has already slowed flights from Phoenix, Tucson, and Brownsville. ICE is scrambling." Trump looked at her, jaw set. "We're enforcing immigration law, and they're calling it a constitutional crisis." Pam flipped through her notes. "It's more than that. They're prepping to open contempt proceedings, acting in bad faith." Those were his words, public and on record. Silence hung for a beat. Trump turned to the window and stared through the bulletproof glass out onto the south lawn. For a second, he wasn't watching the reporters or the cameras. He was looking past them, beyond them, somewhere else. "Contempt," he repeated, almost amused. "They used to say that when I tweeted. Now they say it when I try to secure the border." Caroline spoke finally. "Media is already circling. If we go quiet, they'll write the story for us." "Good," Trump said without turning. "Let them write." He stepped back into the room, his voice growing stronger. "We'll give them something to write about." Pam raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "I'm not letting a bench full of cloaked activists override the people who put me here. If Roberts wants to protect that system, then let him defend it publicly." Caroline's breath caught. "You want to address the court?" Trump didn't answer directly. Instead, he walked to the desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a folded printout of Judge Bosberg's order. He held it up like a prop in a courtroom. "Let's see if they still believe in transparency when the lights are on and the cameras are rolling." Pam exhaled sharply. "You're calling them out live, every last one of them," Trump said, starting with John Roberts. "If he thinks this is about process, he hasn't been paying attention." Caroline tapped her screen nervously. "You'll be accused of politicizing the bench." "I'm not politicizing it," Trump said. "I'm exposing it." He paused, then looked over at both women. "The American people didn't vote for federal judges. They voted for a president, and I'm not going to watch this system turn into a courtroom monarchy while they pretend they're protecting democracy." Pam nodded slowly. "Then we better prepare for a storm." Trump smiled faintly. "Let it come." What started in a courtroom was about to erupt in front of the entire nation. The statement hit Washington like a throne brick wrapped in silk. It wasn't a press conference, no podium, no sound bites, just a brief PDF uploaded to the Supreme Court's official site at 9:03 a.m. But by 9:07, every newsroom, blog, and phone screen in America was lit up with the same headline: Chief Justice Roberts responds to Trump's call for impeachment. Pam Bondi read it twice before walking into the West Wing briefing room. "This isn't a defense of the courts," she said quietly, handing the printout to Caroline. "It's a warning." Caroline scanned the page. Roberts's words were cold and calculated. "Impeachment is not an appropriate response to a legal disagreement with a judge. The judiciary must remain independent even when it issues rulings that are unpopular or inconvenient. Trump wasn't in the Oval Office. He was downstairs in the Roosevelt Room with Senator Felix Morton from Florida and DHS Deputy Director Carl Hickton. Both men had cleared their schedules the moment Roberts spoke. They knew Trump wouldn't sit still. "He's posturing," Morton said, flipping a pen in his hand, trying to remind America that the courts are sacred ground. Trump set down his coffee. "Sacred ground, they've turned it into a battlefield." Carl leaned in. "The order from Bosberg, that wasn't review, that was sabotage. They've started blocking policy before it even lands." Trump nodded. "And now Roberts wants to hide behind tradition, like the robes make them untouchable." He stood. The kind of movement that makes people fall silent. "This is no longer about policy. It's about control." Pam entered quietly, placing the statement in front of him. Trump didn't need to read it. He knew the tone already. Roberts never shouted. He just buried you with sentences designed to sound eternal. "What's the angle?" Morton asked. Caroline had already joined them. "Media is going to paint it as a call for unity, measured leadership in chaotic times. But the base sees it for what it is, deflection. They want to give judges permanent veto power." Trump said, "They don't want to win elections. They want to block whoever does. We gave them years to fix this. What did they do? They held panels, gave speeches, and now when I act, they scream tyranny." Pam crossed her arms. "What's your play, Mr. President?" Trump didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned and looked at them not like colleagues but like soldiers about to hear a mission plan. "They want courtroom rulings. We'll give them courtroom cameras." Felix Morton raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "I want a live session. I want Roberts across from me, and I want the American people watching. No statements, no redacted footnotes. I want faces. I want accountability." Carl Hickton looked uncertain. "You think they'll agree?" "They won't have a choice," Trump replied. "I'll frame it as a legal forum, a national summit on judicial restraint. They say they want transparency. Let's test that theory." Caroline was already typing on her iPad. "Media. We'll flood it. Roberts will look like he's dodging if he refuses." Felix chuckled half in disbelief. "This is going to break every precedent we've ever seen." Trump picked up the Bosberg order again and stared at it. So did that judge when he overruled the entire Department of Homeland Security with one signature. Pam exhaled through her nose. "Then we need a name. Something that hits." Trump thought for a moment. "Call it the National Judicial Reform Summit." Caroline looked up. "You want it at the Supreme Court?" "No," Trump said. "I want it inside the Supreme Court." The room went quiet. The implications were clear. This wasn't about a speech or a statement. This was a call to confrontation. One branch against another, with no curtains left to hide behind. Felix looked over at Pam. "He's serious." Trump nodded once. "They wanted a fight they could win in silence. I'm dragging it into the light." But Trump wasn't going to respond with a tweet this time. He wanted a microphone and a stage. The official invitation hit inboxes just after midnight. No leaks, no press hints, no anonymous aides whispering behind heavy doors. Just a formal email sent from the office of the president, stamped with the seal, and addressed to the Supreme Court. "You are formally invited to participate in the National Judicial Reform Summit, to be held live and on record within the Supreme Court chamber. The purpose is public discourse on judicial authority, nationwide injunctions, and the constitutional balance of power." By 8 a.m., the news had exploded. CNN was calling it an audacious move. Fox ran with "Trump demands accountability from the bench." MSNBC called it a stunt, but nobody could ignore it. Chief Justice John Roberts read the invitation in silence. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't issue a statement. Instead, he gathered with three of his colleagues, Justices Linda Yang, Edward Salazar, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, in a private room off the east hallway. Roberts placed the letter flat on the polished table. "He wants to turn this into a televised confrontation," Yang said, frowning. "This has never been done." "He's not asking," Salazar muttered. "He's daring us to say no." Jackson leaned forward. Do we ignore it? Dismiss it? Meet privately? Roberts looked down at the paper, his face unreadable. We attend. If we refuse, we hand him the narrative that we're hiding, that we're afraid. Yang shook her head. This isn't a forum. This is a trap. Roberts finally looked up. Then we'll go in clear-eyed and controlled. He's coming for spectacle. We'll respond with civility. That's the line we draw. But across town, in a room lined with flags and framed maps, Trump was outlining something very different. We're not just showing up, he told his team. We're staging a reckoning. The summit would be historic. Cameras would be allowed. Every word recorded. 2 lecterns, one under the seal of the Supreme Court, the other beneath the eagle crest of the presidency. Caroline was on her 3rd cup of coffee typing up press credentials. We've had over 200 media requests in 3 hours. International outlets are begging for floor access. Pam Bondi reviewed security protocols. We'll need federal marshals, Capitol, police, Secret Service, the whole net. This isn't just politics, it's national spectacle. Felix Morton walked in holding a folded copy of the Roberts statement. He's agreed to attend. He's bringing 3 justices with him. Said he won't prepare. Remarks wants to speak off script. Trump smiled, but it wasn't amusement. It was purpose. Perfect. The more unfiltered, the better. Caroline looked up. What's the goal? Trump leaned on the edge of the table. To break the illusion they've wrapped themselves in formality so long, they think it makes them untouchable. The people need to see them not as symbols, but as men and women who can be wrong. Pam hesitated. And if they try to flip it back on you, paint you as the tyrant? He didn't miss a beat. Let them. The difference is, I answered to the voters. They answered to no one. Preparations moved fast. By the end of the day, a team from the architect of the Capitol had installed lighting inside the chamber. The lecterns were set, sound checks tested, Secret Service swept the perimeter. Outside, reporters staked out sidewalk spots with folding chairs and thermoses. Protesters gathered on both sides of the building, signs raised. One group chanted for judicial independence, the other held banners that read, "Let the people govern." At 10 p.m., Trump stood alone in the empty East Room of the White House, looking at the freshly printed notes in his folder. No speechwriter had touched them. It was just him, his thoughts, his warnings. Felix walked in quietly. We good for tomorrow? Trump didn't look away from the paper. We're better than good. He closed the folder slowly. Tomorrow, America hears what they weren't supposed to. But no one expected what Trump was about to say in front of the camera. The Supreme Court chamber had never seen anything like it. Not once in its long, shadowed history had a sitting president stood eye to eye with the Chief Justice of the United States. Not through lawyers or court briefs, but in the very house of American law, with cameras rolling and the entire country watching. At precisely 11 a.m., Donald Trump entered from the East Corridor. No teleprompter, no polished notes, just a slim leather folder under one arm and a stare that didn't shift. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He walked to his lectern like he had walked into 100 rooms before, alone, unshaken, and with something to say. Across from him, Chief Justice John Roberts sat at the head of his bench, flanked by Justices Yang, Salazar, and Jackson. His hands were clasped in front of him, posture straight, calm, reserved, measured, like always. The buzz of press cameras clicking filled the edges of the room. Live feeds had already gone active. Fox, CNN, MSNBC, and small networks all ran. The same banner, the Judicial Summit Live from the Supreme Court. Trump scanned the room once, then began. When I swore to defend this country, I didn't expect to be in a room like this, speaking not to enemies overseas but to silence robed in formality. But here we are. He paused. A federal judge recently blocked my administration from deporting individuals we've deemed a threat under laws that predate most people in this chamber. And when we enforced the law anyway, because law should matter more than interpretation, we were accused of bad faith. He held up the folded order from Judge Bosberg. This isn't law, this is leverage. Roberts remained motionless, the cameras cutting briefly to his face, still unreadable. Trump continued. Now we're being told impeachment isn't appropriate, that we should wait, appeal, follow process. But how long do you wait when judges erase policies before they're even implemented? How many injunctions until the people who voted for change get none of it? His tone was steady, not shouting but charged. This country wasn't built so 700 unelected lawyers could rule it from behind closed doors. He turned slightly toward Roberts. Chief Justice, I say this with respect for your position but not for your doctrine. When the people cry out for action and the courts answer with silence, that's not neutrality. That's surrender. Roberts sat forward gently, adjusting his glasses. Then, in a calm, crisp voice, he responded, Mr. President, with respect, this institution exists not to reflect public passion, but to temper it. Courts are not rescue vehicles for stalled policies. They are not weapons of political urgency. Trump didn't interrupt. He listened, arms folded across his chest. Roberts continued, You speak of overreach, but this court has reviewed executive action as far back as Marbury versus Madison. That's not rebellion, that's responsibility. He leaned back slightly. The judiciary is not the threat to the Constitution, Mr. President. It is the safeguard. Trump took a step forward. Then why does it feel like it only safeguards one side? The room didn't move. No gasps, no applause. Just the kind of silence that comes when words land hard and nobody knows what to do with them. Trump opened his folder and pulled out a copy of the Declaration of Independence. The camera zoomed in. Every news network adjusted focus. This document didn't create kings. It dismantled them. He looked down, then back up. If we allow the judiciary to make national decisions in isolation without consequence or election, we've not just lost balance, we've lost the republic. He dropped Judge Bosberg's injunction onto the floor, letting it fall, letting the moment breathe. They call it judicial review. I call it judicial rule. Roberts flinched barely, but enough for anyone watching to see. Trump looked directly into the camera now, not at the bench, not at the justices, but at the people. You were told courts protect you, but when a single judge can cancel your vote with a stamp, that isn't protection. That's power theft. He paused. And today, in this chamber, we're giving that power back. But the silence that followed wasn't respect. It was the realization that the room no longer belonged to the robes. Elon Musk didn't sit during the summit. He stood in the back corner of the Supreme Court chamber, leaning against the wall like someone who'd already seen where this road was headed, phone in hand. He typed a single sentence into X as Trump walked back to the lectern. A courtroom just became a battlefield. By the time Trump reached for the Declaration of Independence again, that post had already crossed 2 million views. But Trump wasn't chasing views. He wasn't even chasing applause. What he wanted, what he'd always wanted, was clarity. And now he had it. He turned the parchment slowly in his hands and said, not to the court, but to the nation. Thomas Jefferson warned us about men in power who wear the appearance of virtue while quietly stealing the people's voice. He paused, then read a line clear. An oligarchy in robes is still an oligarchy. You could hear the weight of those words drop like a stone in the chamber. The phrase cut through centuries of legal tradition, like a knife through fabric. It didn't matter that Jefferson never wrote those exact words. It felt like he had. Pam Bondi, seated behind the president, didn't move. She didn't need to. Her silence wasn't fear. It was recognition. She'd been in law long enough to know when history was being written in real time. Roberts sat like granite, still upright, hands folded, but this time the tension in his jaw betrayed him. Trump stepped away from the parchment, looked out again, at the crowd of reporters, aides, and citizens packed into the high-walled chamber. When a single judge appointed for life can stop a president from defending the border, you don't have balance, you have tyranny, with a nicer font. He bent down and picked up the dropped injunction order from the floor. He held it up. This is a document signed by one man who's never been elected, never faced voters, never had to answer for the chaos it caused. He turned to the court. We had agents standing at the southern line in McAllen ready to intercept cartel. Smugglers. Within hours of this order, they were told to stand down, not because the law changed, but because one man typed a sentence in a PDF and hit send. Then he looked back to the camera. They don't want a bench. They want a throne. And I'm telling you now, this nation won't live under robes pretending they're neutral while they block every elected act they disagree with. Elon glanced down at his screen. The post was now trending worldwide under the hashtags Jar Bench Vote and the Court Takeover. Thousands of Americans were commenting, not just Trump supporters, but independents, even some Democrats. It wasn't about party anymore. It was about control. Justice Yang leaned toward Roberts, whispering something only he could hear. But Roberts didn't move, not yet. Trump's voice lowered, not out of fatigue, but focus. I was elected to do a job. You may not like how I do it. That's fair. That's democracy. But if unelected judges can erase policies without debate or vote, then this republic no longer belongs to the people. He turned back to the justices. It belongs to the people in this room. And then slowly, he pulled a second sheet from the folder. This one was blank on one side, but on the other was a handwritten quote in bold ink, underlined twice. He read it aloud. Power without accountability is not justice, it's theft. He held it high for everyone to see. And that's what this has become. A quiet, careful theft of the people's voice. He dropped that page too. No sound, no cough, no shuffle of feet. Just the cold, perfect quiet of a moment too big to be interrupted. Outside, protesters were now locked in chants, police barriers strained, reporters clutched their phones in disbelief. Some didn't know whether they were covering a government event or a revolution in real time. And back inside, Trump gave the last words of the section with the same cold fury he carried since walking through that door. If Roberts won't fix it, then we will. And we'll do it legally, constitutionally, but completely. But the final blow didn't come from the lectern. It came from the people watching at home. The next morning, America didn't wake up confused. It woke up certain. Every major network replayed the confrontation on loop. Clips flooded social media. Some were just seconds long. Trump holding the declaration, Roberts frozen mid-reaction, the paper hitting the floor. But they carried the weight of an entire era. On local radio stations in Bakersfield, Fresno, Mobile, and Amarillo, callers weren't talking about party lines. They were talking about power. Silence in the system they'd watched, some for decades, being questioned in real time by someone who wasn't afraid to say what most never dared. Pam Bondi stepped into the West Wing press room at 8:02 a.m. with a stack of folders in her arms. "Mr. President," she said as she entered the Oval Office, "the reaction is louder than we thought." Trump, already seated, was sipping coffee and flipping through notes. "Good," he said without looking up. "That means they heard it." Caroline walked in right behind Pam. "We've had nearly 20 members of Congress reach out, senators too. Several want to co-sponsor immediate legislation targeting injunction reform." "Give it a name," Trump said. "We're drafting the Judicial Accountability Act." Pam opened her folder. "Perfect," he said. "Let the courts answer to someone besides themselves." At noon, Senator Felix Morton stood on the Capitol steps and introduced the bill. It proposed tighter guidelines on nationwide injunctions, mandatory review timelines, and public records for all emergency rulings that blocked executive orders. Meanwhile, Elon Musk was already several steps ahead. From his X account, he announced the launch of Courtite, a new digital transparency tool that tracked every federal judge's active rulings against executive authority in real time. The map lit up with glowing dots one by one. The public could now see exactly which judges were stopping which policies, and it wasn't just numbers. It was names, profiles, court locations, summaries. Comments were allowed, public ratings followed. It was legal accountability for an era where most had assumed the bench was sacred and above question. Roberts, for his part, made no follow-up statement. He returned to his chambers and continued to work like it had been any other day. But inside the court, something had changed. The whispers between clerks were different. The way reporters circled the building had changed too. There was no more illusion. Caroline stood next to Trump later that evening, watching a live segment on News Nation. The commentator paused mid-thought and said, "We're not just witnessing politics anymore. This is constitutional course correction." She turned to him. "You think this will last?" Trump didn't answer right away. He was staring at the copy of the Declaration that now hung on the Oval Office wall, placed just inches from where Obama's mirror had once been. "It won't last unless we stay louder than the silence," he said. Pam stepped in. "The left's already mobilizing. Editorials calling this judicial intimidation. Legal experts on cable saying it sets a dangerous precedent." "Good," Trump said. "Let them scream. They've been protected by that silence long enough. We didn't break the system. We broke the illusion." Across the country, people responded not with rage but with reflection. Retired factory workers in Ohio, ranchers in Arizona, a high school civics teacher in Wichita Falls who printed out the speech and had his students read it line by line. This wasn't about one party, one case, one judge. It was about the fear that the people's voice had been taken, not with guns or armies but with signatures and robes and courtrooms, a nobody ever walked into unless they were summoned. That fear had a name now, and so did the pushback. Elon's Courtite app surpassed 5 million downloads within 72 hours. The Judicial Accountability Act picked up bipartisan support from states that hadn't agreed on anything in years. And for the first time in over a decade, a Gallup poll showed that trust in the federal judiciary dropped below 35%. But Trump didn't throw rallies. He didn't tweet victory laps. He simply returned to the desk, opened the folder again, and wrote down names, not enemies, just reminders of what happens when power goes unchecked for too long. But Trump wasn't finished because, for him, this wasn't about a win. It was about a warning. The storm had passed, but the sky hadn't cleared, not yet. Across the nation, living rooms were still quiet, dinner tables still buzzing with questions, and radio hosts still dissecting every second of that broadcast. But under all the noise, one thing was changing. People were thinking, really thinking, not about which side won, not about left versus right. They were thinking about something much deeper, something they hadn't thought about in years. Who's actually in charge? In a small apartment just outside Flagstaff, Arizona, 62-year-old Marlene Cross sat on the edge of her couch, laptop open, eyes focused. She hadn't voted in 2 elections, not because she didn't care. She just didn't think it mattered anymore. But that night, something shifted. When she saw a sitting president tell the highest court in the land face-to-face that their silence had turned into power, it stirred something she couldn't name. For the first time in years, she didn't feel ignored. She felt seen. In Jackson, Mississippi, former Marine Corey Bell watched from a barbershop. He didn't say a word while the clip played, but when it ended, he turned to the others and said, "That's what I've been trying to explain for years." That right there, the Supreme Court had been the last branch people still believed wasn't political. But now people were asking, if judges can stop a president from doing his job and they don't have to answer to voters, is that still democracy? At a charter school in Yuma, a history teacher stood in front of her class holding a printout of Trump's closing line. She read it slowly. "We're going to dismantle it legally, constitutionally, but completely." Then she looked up at her students. "What does that mean to you?" A student raised his hand. "That the rules can't protect you if they're only protecting themselves." There it was. The lesson this entire confrontation hadn't been about one executive order or even one judge. It was about a government that had quietly started answering to itself rather than the people it claimed to represent. For years, citizens had been taught that courts were neutral, that justices were wise, that black robes were a symbol of balance. But what happens when those robes become shields, when neutrality becomes an excuse for inaction? Trump didn't yell, he didn't curse, he didn't even point fingers. He held up the founding document of the country and asked the one question too. Many had been afraid to say out loud, who really runs this country? And the answer wasn't comforting because it wasn't clear. Not Congress, not the president, not the voters. It was a system that had grown so comfortable in silence, so used to operating without scrutiny, that the very idea of being questioned now felt like an attack. But it wasn't an attack. It was a reminder that power belongs to the people, that Checks and balances aren't ceremonial. They're real. And if one branch of government becomes too insulated, too immune from accountability, it doesn't matter how old the building is or how polite the language. It's not a republic anymore. It's a throne surrounded by guards pretending to be a bench. Outside the Supreme Court weeks later, someone taped a handwritten sign to the marble wall. It didn't say Trump 2024. It didn't say vote red. It said, "We gave you trust, not immunity." That message wasn't just for Roberts. It wasn't even just for judges. It was for every elected leader, every appointed official, every figure in a suit who forgot that America isn't powered by process. It's powered by people. The summit might have ended, but the shift had just begun, and it carried one simple truth. If democracy is real, it doesn't live in robes or rulings. It lives in voices. Loud, imperfect, but free. If you believe this country belongs to the people, speak louder than the silence. Subscribe and stay aware.